A great mystery may have just been solved. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is apparently launched into the business side of things, but claims it's not really capitalism when criticized. She is going to be selling merchandise, turning a profit, and then using those profits for special programs. That is a for-profit business. I don't think AOC actually knows what capitalism is. When questioned on it, she defines capitalism as exploitation. No, I think if you've got a problem with exploitation, you've got a problem with exploitation. If you've got a problem with corruption, you got a problem with corruption. One of the key reasons I think many socialists and communists hate capitalism is that they genuinely don't know what it is. And more importantly, they don't really have the world experience. Now, should AOC actually Google search the definition of capitalism, she would find that it's defined as the private ownership of the means of production. I mean, it's kind of obvious, right? Socialism and communism is the public or collective ownership of the means of production. But AOC, when challenged on this, doesn't back down. I wonder how many of these young people actually do love free enterprise, just don't understand. Because here's what we see from these socialists. They say things like, in socialism, there will be no private property. And then you question them. Okay, what about my shoes? And they say something like, well, that's personal property. What's the difference? Well, we're talking about someone owning a factory or something like that. Okay, so who manages it? Who maintains it? Whose interest is in making the business better? But more importantly, their argument, it makes no sense. There can be no distinction between personal property and private property. If they would argue that the factory is the means of production and must be controlled by the public, then I ask you, what is this camera that is sitting just before me? This is why the socialism and communism stuff doesn't work. In front of me sits a small camera. Moderately expensive. It's a really nice camera. It's hooked, got some wires coming out of it. This camera is the means of production, but it's my personal property. It's not a factory, but I run a growing company doing decently well. I run this company essentially off of this camera. Now, to be fair, we have a studio as well. And they might argue that studio is the means of production. Okay, but are the cameras? Are the cameras not my personal property? Is it because the cameras produce something that they become the means of production? What if you are an individual and you make little wooden figurines to sell on the side of the road, and that's how you make money? That's how you eat. Is your whittling knife or whatever it's called the means of production? At what point does the scale of production meet the requirements of their so-called means of production to which they would seize your ability to do work? Let me tell you something. And then we'll read through this article from timcast.com. Would you rather negotiate your own prices and keep your money for yourself after you do work, or submit it all to a collective to determine what you are owed for what you've done? There are a lot of there's a mix of this. Unions, I'm not a fan. I'm a fan of collective bargaining. I'm not a fan of unions where you're forced to effectively go into the system where you can't negotiate on your own behalf. I have quit many jobs because they have restricted my ability to work. You can see where I'm at now. I am essentially a workaholic. I like to work. I like to produce. I like to know what I'm getting for what for the work I do. A lot of people don't want that. Okay, fine. You want to be a socialist and have someone else do the work for you. But therein lies the problem. You see, people like AOC and these democratic socialists seem to think that the world, their lives will dramatically improve were it only for the end, if only capitalism would end. But that's not true. Capitalism, just because Jeff Bezos can go to outer space for a minute, doesn't mean he's taking anything away from anybody. That, in fact, will improve the lives of many people. The peripheral technologies that are developed around things like space travel have been tremendous in improving the lives of poor people. But you see, here's the real deal. Socialists want to extract as much value from the system as possible for themselves. Well, you know what? I get it. They view the world as, I'm only alive for the next X amount of years, so I'll take whatever I want from whoever I want because I'll be dead soon. That's faux collectivism. It's their whole goal. The path to hell is paved with good intentions. Capitalists say we need to take care of ourselves and have personal responsibility. Well, here's the story from timcast.com. AOC claims she's not using capitalism, then describes capitalism. This is kind of funny, but this gets into a bigger picture that I want to talk about. Democrats are running away from the Democratic Party. No joke. There's one article from Axios, and I'm bringing this up as an example. There's one article from Axios where they say that Tim Ryan of Ohio, in his ad for Senate, doesn't even mention he's a Democrat because of people like AOC. For timcast.com, they write, Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez lost another battle to definitions on Monday after claiming her private shop does not use capitalism and then describing the system using various facets of capitalism. Former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer prompted Ocasio-Cortez to flex her economic knowledge by accusing her of using capitalism to push socialism. AOC has a degree in economics, and she doesn't know the rudimentary definition of capitalism. Quote, using capitalism to push socialism, branding the U.S. left, AOC makes a push into political merchandise, Spicer wrote on Twitter, attaching a Reuters article discussing Ocasio-Cortez's private business success. AOC responded by claiming she's not using capitalism, but instead, the economic system used by her privately owned business is based on voluntary transaction determined by private decisions. She cited tutoring, food programs, and local organizing as examples of the investments the private business makes with its profits. Quote, not sure if you know this, Sean, but transactions aren't capitalism. Ocasio-Cortez responded. Capitalism is a system that prioritizes profit at any and all human environmental cost. That is just completely made up by these people. But for what it's worth, our shop is unionized, doesn't operate for profit, and funds projects like free tutoring, food programs, and local organizing, she added. I don't think AOC knows what capitalism means, and that's basically the point of this segment. Okay, Spicer, ostensibly having the unfair advantage of having a dictionary on hand, pointed out to Ocasio-Cortez that capitalism is based in private ownership. He said, thanks for the reply. 1. Actually, the definition of capitalism is based in private, not government ownership. 2. I think you've commented more about this than Cuba. And P.S. Can you come on the Spicer and Cone Newsmax at 6 p.m. to discuss? P.S.S. I think it's P.P.S. Please tag me in the future so I can respond quicker. Thanks. Other Twitter accounts also responded to AOC's statements. One user said, AOC has discovered a secret formula where you take money and make something and sell it without making a profit, then take the money and fund other projects with it. She's a genius. Political Twitter account Matt's Ideas Shop wrote. The Daily Wire's Emily Zanotti wrote, if the shop doesn't make a profit, then how does it fund those programs? Yes, let me explain something to all of you. For one, AOC, I don't believe, is running a non-profit. Those are rather difficult, but nonprofits do make a profit. Profit does not mean that you are stealing money from people. First, let's start with the definition of capitalism. This is important. Merriam-Webster defines capitalism as an economic system characterized by private or corporate ownership of capital goods, by investments that are determined by private decisions, and by prices, production, and the distribution of goods that are determined mainly by competition in a free market. AOC, you are selling merchandise. You are selling the merchandise for more than it costs to make it. That is called the profit. Let me break it down one more step further. If I want to build a birdhouse and I need $20 to buy the materials, I go to the store and I say, I would like to buy the materials for a birdhouse. Here is $20. It gets me the wood, the little tiny nails, and a hammer. Then I go and I build the birdhouse. Bling, now I have a birdhouse. I then go and sell the birdhouse for $25. The $5 on top is called profit. Okay. Now that profit can go into your pocket as the person who did the work so you can buy food and pay your rent. Or if you're a corporation, you can actually include labor costs as the cost of doing business, and the profit is what the business makes on top. You're not exploiting someone by paying them what they agree to and then selling a product and doing that work. Everybody gets a piece. Some people get more. Now, what is a profit? Google says profit, a financial gain, especially the difference between the amount earned and the amount spent in buying, operating, or producing something. To put it quite simply, if AOC is funding, is using it doesn't operate for profit and funds projects like free tutoring, food programs, and local organizing, how does it do food programs? Okay, hold on. Let's be real. Maybe what AOC is saying is she started a company that is selling goods at cost. No one's making a living from this. It's just volunteered time. And then they're volunteering to tutor people, dumpster diving for food, and organizing for free. I don't think that's what she's saying. She says they fund projects, which implies AOC is buying a shirt for $20, selling it for $25, after all of the labor costs are covered using the $5 to then fund these programs. Now, you could argue, see, AOC is not getting compensated. That's proof that it's not for profit. She is still using private market capitalism and making a profit. She's just choosing to allocate that money wherever she sees fit. Who gave AOC the right to take the means of production, producing the merchandise, and then dictate where the extra labor goes? You mean to tell me that if there's $5 on top of the production of this, AOC is choosing to take that from the workers? Ocasio-Cortez is exploiting labor to produce merchandise so that she can fund her political pet projects. Or she's engaging in capitalism. You see how that works? And therein lies the problem. How many young people don't actually know any of this? Let me say it one more time for those in the back. If AOC spends $20 to produce a t-shirt with her face on it, and she then sells it for $25, having not produced the shirt, having done none of the production labor to make the shirt, and then that extra $5 is taken by AOC and allocated into political programs she wants, that is literally capitalism. Or would you say that AOC selling the t-shirt or the clothes for $25 when it only costs $20 and not giving that $5 to the workers who labored over this, isn't that exploitation? Isn't that how they define exploitation? You see, the issue is either AOC is really, really dumb or she's lying. But I'll tell you, I think she just doesn't know. I think a lot of young people have no idea what they're talking about. AOC has a degree in economics and she doesn't know the dictionary definition of capitalism. Oh, okay. Is she giving us the academic definition of capitalism? No, she's giving us the activist definition. The only problem is, by her own standard, she is violating capitalism. No, she is violating worker rights. She's exploiting this. So what is she saying? It pursues profit at all costs. Let me ask you, AOC, do you think your free tutoring, food programs, and local organizing are really, really important? Do you think that merchandise should be sold at a higher cost than the cost to produce it so that you can get money to fund of these programs? Welcome to capitalism. In communism and socialism, such a thing does not exist. Now, there's varying degrees, for sure. You can have a socialist system because 80% of the businesses are owned by the state or the people. And then there's still monetary transaction. Of course, money is an international, is a universal, I shouldn't say universal trade medium. You can still have these things. But if you are talking about the government deciding where the extra value from the labor comes from, or where the extra value from the labor goes, then that's socialism. If you, AOC, as a private individual are making that choice, that's capitalism. Ultimately, I think the things people like AOC and the things she says will result in a new Democratic Party. Axios reports swing country. Rural Democrats run from the party. Yeah. Rural Democrats know what's up because you see the prominence, the loud voice of people like Ocasio-Cortez, and they know people don't want to vote for that. I mean, look, some middle-aged dude, some middle-aged women, they're looking at what AOC is saying is like, is she dumb? Does she not know what she's talking about? She doesn't. And it's a shame. Now, I'm not going to rag on AOC for being a bartender. I respect that. I respect that someone could be a bartender and then run for office and win. I want to see more regular people stand up and say, I want to represent my community and my city and my county and my district. But there is a problem. With someone as young as AOC, with no political experience, with no real world experience, she doesn't know what she's talking about. So by all means, you can represent the people. Hey, that's populism. But AOC does not have the skills to pay the bills. Axios reports a growing swath of House Democratic candidates say the party needs to radically improve its heartland appeal to have any hope of keeping power in Washington. With control of the House and Senate on the bubble, many ambitious Democrats from the South to Midwest to the Rockies are running against their own national party's image. After 4 years of listening to President Trump, many rural voters are reflexively distrustful of progressive solutions to everything from the pandemic to infrastructure. In a 3-minute ad for his Senate campaign, Rep. Tim Ryan of Ohio never says he's a Democrat. That was so spicy when I read that. You kidding me? The dude's got a 3-minute ad. It's one of the worst ads I've ever seen, by the way. But he doesn't even say he's a Democrat? Ugh, yikes. That is bad for the Democrats. That brand is done. They say Democratic strategists are advising candidates in states like these to refrain from fancy language and focus on populist economic policies. Amazing. Several consultants insisted that Democratic policies on labor rights, broadband, climate, and infrastructure are popular in rural areas. It's the messaging that's causing heartburn. Case in point, in Montana, where Republicans have held the state's only U.S. House seat since '97, Democrat Monica Tranel is seeking a second seat Montana is picking up from new census results. Her ad declares, "So many people I grew up with don't vote for Democrats anymore." Wow. She's right. I agree. I don't. I remember being in Chicago when we go to vote, and I was told by my family, just make sure you do Democrat across the board. No joke. That's what I was told. I was like, well, who would I vote for? Just vote for Democrats. Just go and vote for Democrats. Why? Because Republicans are bad. I had no idea what was going on. And then over the past, this was back when I was like, 18, 19, 20. Now I start getting older and I start to see what's actually happening. I don't like the Republicans. Yeah. But the Democrats are just so awful, so despicable, deceitful, stupid. And I don't mean the voters. A lot of the voters, sure. A lot of the voters not realizing they're being fleeced. But these scumbag Democratic politicians, I legit despise, especially because I grew up in Chicago where it's all Democrat. Hey, hold on there. I don't like Republicans either. Many of them are the exact same thing. Scumbag elitist trash who sit on their hands and sell us down the river for a profit. I'm not going to sit here and defend the Republican Party. It's garbage. Donald Trump, human Molotov cocktail. Joe Biden, establishment, authoritarian, fascistic nut job. Kamala Harris, all those things, and add sycophantic, psychopathic. I don't care for most of these people. There's a handful of Republicans I think are okay. There were some Democrats I liked, but the Democratic Party is based on people who don't know what's going on, period. And then you get older and you realize. That's why they want young people to vote. That's why they want the voting age to be 16, so they can convince a bunch of dumb people who have no idea what's happening to vote for things that will hurt them. Remarkably, it's the Democrats who say that's what the Republicans do. Well, to a certain extent, yeah, Republicans do that. But that's old guard talk. We're in a new era. The populists are moving in. Unfortunately, we have socialist populists and then right-wing national populists. Now, I'm all about helping the people and fixing these problems and making everybody live well. And, unfortunately, the left populists have thrown their head in the ring with the establishment elitists. And that's where we are. Now, the Republicans, they got taken over. The GOP got taken over by Trump. For all Trump's problems, he's at least a populist. They say, quote, "They feel like Democrats look down on rural America," she says. "Recent moves by Biden on infrastructure and the child tax credit are consistent with traditional economic Democratic populism that has real currency in rural areas," said Zach McCrary, a Dem pollster and partner at ALG Research. McCrary added that in swing districts and states, Democrats need to have an answer to the question, what makes you different from a lot of the other Democrats? These concerns aren't new. Some Democratic leaders have long warned that the language of the left hurts Democrats in swing and rural districts. Rep. Jim Clyburn discouraged defund the police. In Iowa, former Democratic congressional candidate J.D. Scholten announced last week that instead of running again, he'll head a rural voter PAC aimed at improving the party's brand. The group will target 39 U.S. counties in rural battleground states, aiming to improve Democratic candidates' performance by 5%. Yeah, well, let's push back on that. Go to timcast.com, be a member, share the articles, share the videos. I'm not going to stand for this. I don't want people to vote Republican necessarily, but I certainly don't want the Democrats to win, because we know what happens when you get Democrats in. Nancy Pelosi, impeachment. Yeah, she wouldn't actually do her stupid job. We get 31 swing Democrats who come in, supposed to be moderates, and they drop to their knees and they kiss the pinky ring like pathetic, spineless scumbags. They don't deserve to win. These rural areas are going to be fleeced by these scumbag elitist Democrats. Nah, I'm sick of it. Forgive me for getting so angry, but I am sick of it. The Republicans at least do nothing. You vote for a Republican and they'll tell you, I'm going to do this, that, or otherwise. And then they sit on their hands and you're like, just do something for once. Tell me what institutions the Republicans control? College? No. Movies? No. Comic books? No. Video games? No. Big cities? No. Import? No. Nothing. They sit on their hands because they're losers. The Democrats, on the other hand, they use hate and disdain And they say the right are white supremacists and racists and evil, and that's how they get votes. Because what do you actually campaign on? The Republicans who want voter suppression bills. Did you read the bills they're trying to pass? No, we didn't, but they're voter suppression bills. They're not. Did you actually read them? I did. Yeah, mostly they're trying to pull back some of the policies granted because of the pandemic. So how is that suppression? They're actually going to allow policies that make it easier to vote to stay in permanently? Yeah. Because the Democrats are lying. But you know what? That's why people aren't saying Democrat anymore. Tim Ryan doesn't call himself a Democrat. Amazing. And then we have this. AOC isn't just economically illiterate. She's woke. And over at CNN, why wokeness is the biggest threat to Democrats in the 2020 election. They are starting to wake up. Axios reports rise of the anti-woke Democrat. Eric Adams wins the Democratic primary in New York to be mayor. So this is interesting. We'll see how this plays out. Granted, I think this country is falling apart. I think we're more than just bifurcated politically. Joe Biden and the federal government are so scared and desperate to cling on to any kind of control that they're doing these insane things, arresting people and expanding Capitol Police. But that just says to me that they're desperate. If they had control, they wouldn't need to do these things. They wouldn't need to go after anybody, but they've lost control, and now it's free fall. I'd imagine that we're headed towards a future where federal government has almost no power, and people mostly disregard it because that's what's happening. We've got sanctuary cities and states. You've got 2A sanctuary cities and counties and states. So how long until the federal government is just screaming and waving its finger and stomping on the ground and no one listens? I think we're getting really close to that. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.